Let's make some announcements. Learning announcements. A year of learning sponsored by Julian Boris Kagan to commemorate the US of Julian's father, Yosef Ben Motto. I sent out email in regard to the Rosh Chodesh barbecue and learn. Okay, so people already started making reservations. If you'd like to join us, that'll be on Sunday, May 17th at 5 o'clock. That's about it.
Okay, good morning. Yesterday was Lag BaOmer. The initial question, of course, is why is it not Lag LaOmer? And when we count Sfira every night, we say Hayom, so many days LaOmer, right? All right, so some people do say BaOmer. And therefore, but Lag BaOmer, I guess, became the accepted way to refer to the date. But making Lag BaOmer into a semi-yontif is a relatively new practice, and it became very, very accepted among the Hasidic community, perhaps even in some place in the yeshivish community to a certain extent. But it's a very bizarre day. I want to explore it. Again, this is part of our ongoing discussion of how minhagim somehow take over in the absence of any factual information to the contrary. Lag BaOmer is sometimes described as a day in which the person who didn't write the Zohar didn't die and celebrate at the place where he isn't buried. If you ask the average person why Lag BaOmer is a semi-holiday, they'll tell you it celebrates the yahrzeit of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, who was buried in Meron, who wrote the Zohar. The only problem is he didn't write the Zohar. It was written by a very famous Kabbalist named Moshe de Leon in Spain in the 13th century. Although if you ask the average person who wrote the Zohar, Shimon Bar Yochai. But that's not true. Number one. Number two, he didn't die on Lag BaOmer. He's not buried in Meron. And all these things just developed over a period of time that people accepted pretty much as factual. We discussed already the fact that the plague that killed Rabbi Akiva's students ended on Lag BaOmer. That's a medieval tradition or belief. But again, the plague ended because all the students died. There's nobody else to kill. So that's another problem. Over the centuries, Lag BaOmer was a very, very minor semi-festival, you can call it that. A lot of inaccuracies, a lot of things happened over the centuries that propelled it into becoming more than it is. There is no historical reason to celebrate Lag BaOmer. It may sound heretical to some people. The trouble is, the situation that promoted Lag BaOmer is the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, which is an area of study that's relegated to a very select few. But those who are not initiated into the secrets of the Kabbalah have tremendous respect for those who do. So if somebody says this minhag is based on Kabbalah, it's considered something that is very, very important to be taken very seriously. But there's no historical reason, especially a number of years ago, a terrible tragedy occurred because of this in Meron. Meron is a small mountaintop area where the supposed kever Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is, and it's not set up to handle thousands upon thousands of people that congregate there on Lag BaOmer. And time again, safety experts have warned that you have to take precautions. Things have to be done that have not been done because the Hasidic community that controls the Lag BaOmer festivities has been neglectful of safety precautions on Meron. As a result of that, 45 people get trampled to death a number of years ago. This year, they closed Meron because of what's going on in Israel in general, but nevertheless, all the Hasidic rabbis encourage their followers to ignore the government and go there anyway. I don't know what happened yesterday. I didn't see the news yet. But clearly, what happened in Meron a number of years ago, causing the death of so many people, and all the bonfires and all the other, the fire department in Israel is kept very, very busy on Lag BaOmer because of these bonfires. And we don't have any real historical reason to celebrate Lag BaOmer, but the Jewish mysticism has kind of hypnotized certain segments of our community to make this into a yontif. There is no evidence that Shimon Yochai particularly died on this day. It's based on a printing error in one of the writings of the Ari. It's not his yard site. But once something has crept into the Jewish mainstream of thought in these areas, it becomes sacrosanct. And if this Rebbe or that Rebbe says to do it, then it becomes part of the calendar. There is no evidence historically that Lag BaOmer was celebrated before the 17th century. That's the earliest reference that we have. Many Gedolim opposed Lag BaOmer celebrations. The Chassam Sofer, one of the great Gedolei HaPoskim, everybody accepts him, says, I don't know where it came from. Some of his language is very, very strong. I'm going to read directly from his Chuvos. Likboa Moed, to establish a holiday, Shelo Naseh Bones, where there was no miraculous event that took place. The Lo Niskar B'Shasu Poskim, and it's not mentioned in the Talmud or the Poskim, B'Shum Mokum, any place. The Remez or Remiza, and there's only indirect hints in that you don't make Hespedim and you don't have fast. Minhagahu, it's a minhag. The Tame Gufa Lo Yodana. Chassam Sofer, knowledgeable guy. I have no idea where this came from. All right? And elsewhere he writes, furthermore, if you celebrate the yard site of Shimon Bar Yochai, the supposed author of the Zohar, how do you celebrate a yard site? You don't celebrate it by dancing and singing and bonfires and celebration. Heichon metzinu lasos yom moed b'yom siluk tzaddik. When a great tzaddik dies, you don't make it into a holiday. You fast. It's a serious day, a yard site. How do you make it into a party? Rav Yaakov Emden, another great gadol, also says, I don't know where this comes from. Clearly, and again, in the non-Orthodox world or the non-Hasidic world, if people accept as a fact that Moshe de Leon, Spanish Kabbalist, is the one who wrote the Zohar, based on the analysis of the Aramaic and so forth and so on, most historians would agree he was the author. But if you ask the average rabbi, certainly among Hasidim, who wrote the Zohar? Shimon Bar Yochai. So you have gaps between historicity, what actually took place, and what people believe took place. It's one of these holidays that just took over the collective mind of certain aspects in the Hasidic community. And today there's a whole tekes, a whole ceremony of what takes place on Meron. There was bickering between which Hasidic rabbi has the right to light the bonfire. And it's purchased, and the Bayana Rebbe, right, lights the fire. Why him of all? I don't know. The head of Toldos Aron, a very extreme sect in Yerushalayim, said everybody should go to Meron regardless of the government attempts to limit the number of participants. I mean, it's sakanas nefashos. People died. People trampled. There are so many people there, and there aren't enough passageways for people to move. And all you need is one person to start running, and then people get trampled. And that's what happened.
Wally?
Yes.
I was told in yeshiva that we celebrate Lag BaOmer either because none of Rabbi Akiva's students died that day, or because the dying stopped altogether on that day.
Okay, so the dying stopped, fine. So that, again, that might be a remez, a hint for why we stopped some of the avelus during Sfira. And that, you know, and there's a whole discussion, you know, the Gemara says they died between Pesach and Shavuos. So that's 49 days of avelus. Then somebody found a manuscript in the Middle Ages that talked about, and not until I would say when did this take place? Probably in the 17th century. There was a sefer written by a very questionable author. The sefer called Chemdas Hayamim. You never heard of it. Written by Natan Ha'azati, Nathan of Gaza. A brilliant, brilliant Kabbalist. But he was also crazy. He was the propagandist for Shabtai Tzvi, the false Messiah. And he was so good at twisting the Kabbalah around, and maybe at some point we'll talk about how he twisted the Kabbalah of the Ari around, although we shouldn't discuss Kabbalah in public. He convinced many people that Shabtai Tzvi was the Mashiach. Not only that, but many prominent rabbis in Europe also believed it. It caused tremendous tumult. Shabtai Tzvi was the most successful false Messiah in history because the whole world was split up, including many important rabbis. But ultimately, he was proven to be, you know, when he converted to Islam, that was a pretty good hint that he wasn't the Messiah. The notion of 33 days, which 33 days they died from, you know, that's a machlok. We discussed it once before. Interesting, the Maharil, who chronicles most of our Ashkenazi minhagim, states that the students died throughout the entire period between Pesach and Shavuos. They didn't die on those days when you didn't say Tachanun. So if you calculate all the days when Tachanun is not recited, 7 days of Shabbos, the last 7 days of Pesach, 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, 1 day Rosh Chodesh Sivan, 2 days Rosh Chodesh Iyar, you end up with 32 days. So there's essentially very few people follow that minhag anymore. I mean, it's either from Pesach until Lag BaOmer or from Rosh Chodesh until Shavuos. But this is the third minhag the Maharil mentions. Apparently, some people followed this. Again, the Kabbalists, followed by the Hasidim, make Lag BaOmer made it into a yontif. And again, it's very, very interesting how the Hasidic mind works. In the Lithuanian world, in the Litvischer world, in the Mistagdig world, when you have a yard site, you fast. You fast, you learn. In the Hasidic world, what do you do when you have a yard site? You have a l'chaim. The Neshama should have an aliyah. It's a celebration. The Neshama is going higher and higher in Gan Eden. Right? Shomer Torah is Hasidic in that regard. Because a lot of people have yard sites to give a little ticket afterwards. The Neshama should have an aliyah. So normally, in normative halacha, a tanis is a very serious thing. You remember the person who was nifter. I remember one of the most amazing memories, experiences to have. Salvation, when he had yard site for his father. So after the Shiur was over, he would go to the base medrash, and he would start learning Mishnayos out loud to himself. He sat at a table, the base medrash, and a few talmidim would gather around, And then an hour later, half a dozen became 20, and then 30. And then by the time Mincha came around, there's 100 people sitting around the table where a Rav is learning Mishnayos to himself out loud. Because he learns Mishnayos, he covers the entire Shas. It's another story. But that's how you observe a yard site. You remember, you learn Torah to remember the person that was nifter. You don't have bonfires and celebrations. And one of the things that I don't understand, I have tremendous love for the Hasidic way of life. There are a lot of very positive features there, but there are certain things that I don't understand. The yard site for the Ari, one of the great Kabbalists, is, I think, on the 18th day of Tammuz, 17th or 18th day of Tammuz, I forget which. And I happen to have been at Tzfat. If you're in Tzfat, there is an old cemetery on a mountainside. It was never fixed. It's on a hill, and the graves are all over the place. And many great rabbis are buried there. And I wanted to go visit. I'm there anyway, so I was going to go to visit his kever on Shavasa B'Tammuz. I couldn't get near the place. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Hasidim were there. I couldn't, so I thought, I'll go the next day. A lot of great rabbis are buried on that hillside. I went the next day and I was appalled. Appalled for two reasons. Number one, the mess that I found. But number two, I had taken people with me to show it to them and I was embarrassed. There was food every place. There was torn clothing and tzitzis and talesim and garbage and a pile of wax that was 5 feet tall. I mean, there was a guy there all night long after the chas, chipping away at the wax from all the candles to get to the grave. I was appalled. You don't bring food into a cemetery. And they were partying. They were partying. That's how they celebrate a yard site. So, as I say, it's a late Hasidic invention to celebrate the way they do in Meron. It's a type of celebration that is anathema to the way most yard sites should be observed, despite the fact that it's not his yard site and he's not buried there. But if you ask anybody where he's buried, Meron, of course. We have no documentation about that. We don't know when he died. But the belief has developed. Shimon Bar Yochai, number one, author the Zohar, not true. Died on Lag BaOmer, also not true. We don't know. And is buried in Meron, for sure not. But that's where everybody thinks he is. And that became a great yontif. Many Achronim, like Yosef Shaul Nathanson, Shaul Ameshiv, great posek, objects to the same way the Chassam. So the Chassam Sofer is, what's what to look at, is, I wouldn't say worshipped, but is admired and accepted as a great, great authority by Hasidim. Yet, he says, I don't know where this minhag comes from. But, as we've said in the past, when you have a minhag that has become so entrenched, people forget where it may or may not have come from. And that's why Lag BaOmer has become accepted today as a mini holiday, shall I say. And the fire department is kept very, very busy
Molly?
on Lag BaOmer. Just one other thing I want to say, that when Lag BaOmer comes out on a Saturday night, the Chilul Shabbos that takes place, Mamash, Chilul Shabbos, in preparing all these bonfires, it's a terrible, terrible thing. And there are, I saw some fascinating documents by Shomer Shabbos firemen who were forced to be called out on Shabbos for all these preparations that people are making for the bonfires. They couldn't wait until the stars come out. They thought, it's a horrible thing that just got out of control. Yes.
The Goyim, they don't, they celebrate the person's life, not his death.
Well, so do Jews.
They don't have a shiva, they have a wake.
Correct.
Where everybody's drinking and partying. Yeah, and so the Hasidim are basically following what the Goyim are doing.
Oh, don't tell that to them. Don't tell that to them. But it's true. We should celebrate the life of the person who was nifter. And we do that by learning Torah, by fasting in some cases. All right. Again, even the whole notion of yahrzeit is a minhag of what we do about it. But clearly, the celebration at Meron, again, to summarize, is a very late event that didn't occur until after this book, Chemdas Yomim, was published by a Sabbatean, which is why many people disregarded it. But I guess Hasidim will never pass over an opportunity to have a celebration, drink a l'chaim, dance around a bonfire. But when you think about it, if you look at history, look at some of the ancient pagan practices, and they would dance around celebrating their avodah zarah around fires, bonfires. And when you look at what's going on in Meron, and these Hasidim dancing and singing and drinking around bonfires, you have to ask yourself a question. Is this intrinsically a Jewish thing? In the yeshivas per se, Lag BaOmer is not really celebrated that much. But in some places in Israel, of course, they do, because that became the accepted way to do it. So clearly, Lag BaOmer is, I would probably say, the most recent Jewish holiday or mini holiday in our calendar. The Jewish community, the Jewish communal mind, has been able to take certain events in history and memorialize them. On the other hand, there's a reluctance to memorialize other events. For example, the Frum community has not really embraced Yom HaShoah. I don't know why. Lag BaOmer is intrinsically connected to the Crusades. And after the Crusades, Jewish communities all over Europe commemorated those who died in the Crusades. And Yizkor developed as a result of that, and Kaddish developed as a result of that. But as a result of the Shoah, 33,000 students of Rabbi Akiva dying, whatever that number was, is a terrible tragedy. 6 million is even a bigger tragedy. Yet, and why is there a reluctance? Because it was the secular government of Israel that proclaimed Yom HaShoah, not the rabbis. Now, so in order to make up for it, so the rabbi said, okay, so Asara B'Teves, it should be our Yom HaShoah. But you don't see too many people commemorating the Shoah on Asara B'Teves, even though on paper it might be there. So I don't have an answer. To say that we are not great enough to proclaim an event is not really honest. Because if they want to, they could. If all the rabbis got together, put aside their political differences, the RCA and the Agudas Rabbanim and the Actus and all the various, they all say, okay, we are going to pick one day during the year to memorialize the loss of 6 million Jews. Whether it's Asar B'Teves, whether it's Yom HaShoah, whatever the day might be, and actually have a commemoration and say a Kaddish or do something. Or Kel Mole. Hasn't happened yet, nor will it happen. Because who are we to proclaim? Yet, Lag BaOmer, which was popularized by a Shabtai Tzvinik, that's okay. So these are questions that I'm raising that I don't have good answers for. I do have an answer, but I don't want to say it publicly. But there are answers to these questions. And it just, once again, going back to the theme that we've been using over and over again in our discussions, that the power of minhag is so strong that once it becomes entrenched, people forget how it got started, and it becomes part of the fabric of Jewish life. And I'll just conclude by reminding you that if you take the word minhag and you turn it around, you get the word Gehenna with the same letters. Something to think about. Any questions? Yes.
Wally,
Oh, yes, Howie.
can you say anything about an article that I saw that some Hasidim in Israel went on the Temple Mount Pesach Sheni to try to sacrifice a goat?
They've been trying to do that for centuries. There are people that want to reinstitute korbanos. The only problem is the area where the Mizbeach was is where the Dome of the Rock is.
Yeah.
So that could be problematic. But there have been people over the years that have tried to do that.
Okay.
And of course, today you get arrested.
Yeah.
But there have been serious halachic discussions about reinstituting korbanos bisman hazeh. Maybe not necessarily, the regular korbanos, but possibly the korban Pesach. There have been attempts over the years, and there are some serious halachic discussions as to whether we can reinstitute our korbanos before Mashiach comes, assuming we can get access to the Makom HaMikdash. But yeah, there are people that try to do that.
Thank
Although
you.
I will say that things have gotten a little bit better because now you can actually find minyanim on Harabayas occasionally when the Arab guards aren't looking to try to sneak in a quick mincha. I know that Rabbi Tendler Zatzal used to make it his practice to go to Harabayas every year on Tisha B'Av. He ordered mikveh, he'd put on sneakers, and he would go to up at Harabayas on Tisha B'Av with a group of his followers. Other rabbis do the same thing. Again, b'mheira yibana hamikdash, and all these questions will be resolved. But in the meantime, it's embroiled in politics between the Jordanian government that controls the Harabayas, which we gave them the right to do, and the Jewish rabbinic authorities. And there's a tension that goes on every single day, especially when the Arabs do archaeological excavations in an area that they shouldn't be doing it under the Makom HaMikdash. So there's a lot of tension going on there. But there are people that will try to go up there and sacrifice a goat. Michael, you got a question? Yeah, but there are those who will commemorate the Shoah on Tisha B'Av, correct. But to the extent that Rav Schwab and a few others, the Bavava Rebbe, as well, wrote keynotes for the Shoah, which some places recite on Tisha B'Av, but it has not been widely accepted throughout the Frum world, which is unfortunate.
What does your community do for Yom HaShoah?
We have quite a few commemorations. There are two major community-wide celebrations, in addition to which many individual synagogues have, if they can still find survivors to speak, and they do have commemorations. So we do that. TNEC has a very big one. The Federation has a very big one, and many shuls have their own individual ones. So they do commemorate Yom HaShoah in a significant way in our community. What do they do out in Baltimore area?
In Annapolis, we had all the synagogues rotate every year with a commemoration. And this year, our former rabbi, whose parents were Holocaust survivors, spoke about their story in their voices. Very moving
Nice
story about the Shoah for them.
Yeah, but again, I still think that the established rabbinical authorities missed the boat on this one.
Yeah.
There should be an official halachic day of remembrance for the Shoah. The same way that there were many memorials after the Crusades that became part of the halachic world. Yes, Mendy.
The reason why Bowen is so popular, remember, when you were a kid in elementary school, they took you out for hikes, they took you to the park, and you went to play ball. So they had a barbecue. It was ingrained.
Yeah.
Age. That's what they did to the kids today. They brainwashed them into these crazy ideas. So when you have a concept that is ingrained into you from a very young age, it kind of takes off.
But it takes off in terms of Lag Bomer picnics for kids in school. It's a day off. But in the halachic world,
you have something to work with.
Look, there's certainly a great deal to be discussed. And unfortunately, it has not been established in any meaningful halachic ways. There are different minhagim as to what you can do during Sphira. I mean, some of the questions are bordering on the ridiculous. I remember in Rav Aaron Soloveitchik's Shiur once, a guy asked him, Rebbe, can you go to movies during Sphira? And Rav Aaron said to him, ask the first question first. So you could have all kinds of minhagim, what you may or may not do during Sphira, some serious, some frivolous. I still think, again, Lag BaOmer as a celebration has gotten out of control at Meron. They made something that was relatively minor into a major event. Who knows? I don't know what took place yesterday there. I haven't seen the pictures from Israel yet, but it's embarrassing. To put it mildly, it's embarrassing, and it doesn't speak well for the Hasidic community in the eyes of the rest of the world as to what goes on in Meron on Lag BaOmer. It's very unfortunate, and it led to almost 50 people getting trampled to death a couple of years ago at Meron because they refused to listen to the safety experts. They refused to limit people in certain areas. They refused to expand the exits. And as a result, it's a tragedy waiting to happen, and it happened. So I hope nobody got hurt yesterday.
Rabbi, that chief
Yes.
Spartan rabbi, I got it on a WhatsApp thing, and he's saying that this is before Lag BaOmer, that the army is telling you not to gather.
That's correct.
And he says, Sakanat Nefesh, and you shouldn't do it. And then he goes with his ayins and his chet, he switches totally to a heavy Ashkenazic, way of speaking. And he said, how they are saying that Hashem will protect. And he said, that's ridiculous. And he goes, on Yom Kippur, if your doctor says you 100% need to eat, you need to eat. That's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And he said they're totally out of their minds, thinking that God's going to protect them, because by going there, it's just going to bring more attention for the enemies to focus there. And they didn't listen. They were smuggling through areas in the fence. There were videos of them climbing over
because the Hasidic rabbis encouraged them to do that.
There was this big, I forget the name of the rabbi. He was in a gold kapota.
The head of
And he was the one. Oh my God!
I'll tell you who he was.
It
Where
was
is
just,
it? The head of Todos Aro,
it was just horrible.
Rabbi Yitzchak Kirschenbaum, the head of Todos Aro.
It was just ridiculous, and they're singing, and he's encouraging them, and
Yeah. Good for Rav Yosef. Okay. Have a good day, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good day.
Have a good day, Yanush. Rabbi Steiner, Yishem Baruch Medav Yad Allah, B'Shus Kol B'Subin Kan V'Rei Shachal Mishalo. Rosh Chalam Shlot V'Chayinu, Baruch Atom Mazon Esom Klum, V'Rutz Alechem, V'Rutz Akilam Chasto, Uvtuvo HaGadol Tamilon. He who has not finished Lakol Mitiv Lakol Michim Mazon L'Chol B'Riyosav Asher Bara, Baruch Ato Adonai Hazon Es HaKol. No Del Baruch Ato Adonai al ha'oretz v'al hamazon. V'nei Yerushalayim. Baruch Ato Adonai b'nei berachamav Yerushalayim. Amen. Umikol tov v'yalama yechasreinu.